Hello and welcome to another edition of Fide's podcast. My name is Jerry Serino and I'm your host, and I'm here with talent on loan from Rush. I actually was just looking at my feed that I look at every day, and I saw that on today, January 10th, 1776 is the day that Thomas Paine published the great document Common Sense. Unfortunately, most people in our country and definitely almost all of our politicians lack common sense today. That is for sure. And we're going to talk about some of those issues that need some common sense. And we're going to talk about them with my great guest today, David Zere. He is the host of Breaking Point on Real America's Voice Network. A great man and doing great things. And he's here to share his story and what he's doing, and to talk about some issues that I am interested in his opinion. So, David, thanks for coming on.
Hi, how are you, Jerry? Great to be with you.
Excellent. So first, I got to ask about your great background. I love the picture of Trump. Maybe just share real quick where exactly you're at, and then I'd love to know too, if you want to go right into it. Tell me about your background. Like, how the heck did you get into doing what you're doing right now?
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I am located at the America First warehouse on Long Island, about 30 miles outside of New York City. This place is amazing. It's a most patriotic venue in the United States. I have a lot of specials here. We have a lot of great events. And I am a show host and a field correspondent for Real America's Voice News. And I work in conjunction with the America First warehouse. I've had great events here. Cash Patel twice, MTG, John Solomon, you name it. And Miranda Devine, Monica Crowley. We have great live events out of here. And I have a studio nearby, which is the New York studio for Real America's Voice News. I host the show Breaking Point on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. If you download the Real America's Voice News app, or we're on Pluto TV, channel 470, Dish Network 219, Samsung TV, channel 1029, Apple, Roku, Distro TV, or just watch it on the website at americasvoice.news. So I've been with the network for about 5 years this month, and I've been following the Trump campaign actively on the road as a field correspondent, and CPAC and Turning Point and all the other issues of our time, the Pray Vote Stand Summit, the Faith and Freedom Coalition. On my show, we have great guests. I'm on the campaign trail back and forth to Iowa. I've been there about 10 times for the network. I just got back the other day. I'm going back for 5 days. It's going to be 17 below on caucus night. We're very worried about the safety of our crews and everything. It's going to be wet, snowy, frozen, and but we'll be on the ground giving you the best coverage on Real America's Voice News for caucus night. And then the week after, I'll be 4 or 5 days in New Hampshire. We'll be bringing you coverage every day on that as well. And after that, Nevada for 3 days, the 6th primary and the 8th caucus. We could talk about that because that's a mess. And then South Carolina. So my background is I am a commercial real estate broker for 36 years in New York. I am a builder, developer. I've managed about $500 million in construction in the New York area and gotten over 4,000 permits. So I know what it's like to deal with the communists in New York and the bureaucrats and getting approvals and everything. It's really hard. You just get punished for being in business here. I'm a taxpayer advocate. I was in Russia when I was 16. I saw the tanks in the street when it was still communist back in the 80s. And my sister, who passed away earlier this year, was the only person to ever get a Soviet citizen out of the country through marriage. Was Sean Hannity's first guest ever in her in his radio career with her new husband from Russia. So our eyes were opened up early, and I've been active in politics for 38 years. I've worked on about 200 campaigns, whether it's hosting fundraisers or campaign staff or getting people out to vote and writing legislation to protect small businesses in New York, including the Pine Barrens deal, which preserved 110,000 acres of land, but also guaranteed them Fifth Amendment rights for the takings that were taking place and fair compensation, for the takings. They did get a raw deal in the end, but I was on the commission for 7 years. So I'm very sensitive to those types of issues that affect small business. $38,000, $42,000 a year to carry health insurance for your business. If you're a roofer, you pay $30 per $100 for every dollar of payroll you pay. If you're a roofer, to the state. So, the cost of doing business and the matching funds and the regulation and the permitting and everything, it doesn't pay to be here. So 1.9 million New Yorkers have left since 2012. Yep. Going to red states. We've lost real good quality people here in New York. So
lots of people. Yeah. And speaking of Sean Hannity, I saw recently left New York, just for the reasons that you pointed out. I know Rush Limbaugh had left many, many years ago. It's interesting you bring up, being in the Soviet Union or the former Soviet Union. That's an area I wanted to talk about. But before we do, when you talked about all these challenges of New York and the country, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the guest had said, how our country was founded. If you look at our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments, for those that don't know, we were founded on a small limited government, and we have become, in this relatively short period of time, the largest behemoth of a government in the history of the world, really. And that tells you just that even if our goal was to have a small limited government, we have to keep these politicians in check, because they're the ones who are responsible. And of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, they lack common sense. So I want to ask you a question. I made a statement maybe about a year or so ago, and saying that I believe that Joe Biden and the Democrats, because it's not just Joe Biden, is more dangerous to the people of this country than Vladimir Putin. And some people kind of said, I don't know if you should say that kind of thing. And, I made the point that if you look up and do just a little bit of research on Putin, like, why is Putin so hated, right? I don't like him. I don't know him. I don't really even care about Putin, right? He's in another country. I mean, I do, but I don't. And you look at the reasons why he's such a bad person. He's corrupt. He enriches his family. He gets rid of, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. He gets rid of his political enemies and so on. And I thought to myself, that sounds like they're describing Joe Biden. So who is more dangerous to the people of this country, the people listening to my show and listen to your network and your show? Who is more dangerous to the people of this country?
Well, Trump said, I was covering the Newton, Iowa rally. Extraordinary turnouts for Trump, by the way, in Iowa, 2-3 to 1 over all the other candidates. He said the Democrats are more dangerous than China. And, look at our border, and look at the unmitigated assault on hardworking Americans. And we're tired of being called the bad people for being the good people out there. Nobody represents the guy who opens his gates for his crews anymore. So it's not just the Democrats that are degrading our country from within. But when you look at the municipal union structure in the country, especially the blue states, New York, the power they have, Republicans and Democrats. You go to the towns, they treat you like garbage. Your shed's too close to the property line. They fine you thousands of dollars for having a finished basement. They want you to upgrade your sanitary system and spend $35,000 for new septic systems on your lawn. And you go to the state, you don't get any help unless you're an illegal alien. And then you go to the feds, and it's just a big bureaucracy pension state, a monolithic pension state that's unfundable, and they don't really care about you. They're feds, right? So not to knock all government workers, but that's the mentality, and it's bureaucratic, and it's Soviet-style tactics. It's the bureaucracy and the sloth of government mixed with a concentrated power over the people. So you as an individual person don't have any rights anymore. In New York State, you need a license to have a semi-automatic rifle, the SAFE Act. And I left the Republican Party after 30 years, and I still I support Republican candidates where they deserve it. But they voted for the SAFE Act in New York to take your gun rights away. And that's why I left the party in 2016 to vote for Trump on the conservative line. And, your rights are fleeting. You need a wait period to buy ammo in New York now. It just keeps getting worse and worse. and worse, and we're the bellwether for the rest of the country. It's Washington, D.C., where everybody lives in $1 million home in Alexandria, Virginia, because they're an accountant for the government. It's California, where the average home is $1.6 million or something stupid like that. And in New York, you have to make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year if you raise a family in the 5 boroughs. In Manhattan and 200 plus on Long Island here, property taxes $20,000 a year. So it's not just Democrats. Now, the Democrats and the liberal mentality is destroying our national security. It's putting everybody in jeopardy. We don't know who's coming across the border. We're going to have 16 million illegals here just throughout the Biden administration. I think that's going to be the real number. 400,000 a month for the rest of the upcoming year, for 2024. I can't believe we're in 2024 already.
I know.
So there's a lot of things. It's a toxic cocktail of the breakdown of the moral fiber, breakdown of the family, a lack of representation by your elected officials, congressmen getting rich while they're in office, people coming out worth 10, 20, 50, $100 million in their political career. And nobody cares about you.
Yeah, no, perfectly said. It's a horrible mess, and it's people just like us, just average people, as you said, opening the gate for the workers, or people like listening, who just get up in the morning, go to work, and whatever line of work they're in, it doesn't have to be white collar, blue collar. We're the ones who are getting screwed. So really, really good points. I want to ask you about the election. I have a number of topics, and I'm in the midst of reading this book, Rigged.
Yeah,
by
I
Molly.
Have it. I didn't read it yet, but
Yeah.
I've seen her a lot of times about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk to her. She's tough, but nevertheless, I'm in the midst of reading it, and there's a lot that I knew about the 2020 election anyways, even without the book, but certainly getting the documented, researched information and evidence from someone like Molly Hemingway in this book, I'd recommend anyone get it. So when Trump or anyone says anything about the election, the left will say you're an election denier. They'll even censor and so on and so forth. So tell me what your thoughts and opinions are about the 2020 election.
I spent a lot of time around the ground. I've been to 35 plus states with the network for 5 years. I've been active for a really long time, and I do believe 2020 was stolen. I follow it closely. I talk to Rudy Giuliani all the time about 790,000 votes, or where we were ahead by on election night. And, he says he has incontrovertible scientific evidence that Pennsylvania was stolen by 250 to 290,000 votes. What happened to the mail truck that left Long Island with 288,000 ballots? There's no closed caption or circuit television of the theft of that truck, of those ballots. He believes that those ballots were used in Philly when they kicked everyone out. They taped up the windows. They ran them through. 700,000 ballots went through the machines in Pennsylvania without a single Republican witness. And now there's no way to track it and go back. I do believe there was mass fraud. There was a forensic study in Michigan that said 35 to 38,000 absentee ballots were submitted by people who didn't request absentee ballots. We know about people saying that absentee ballots came back in sequential order. We know about the affidavits of people testifying, like that woman from India, who is one of the 50th largest or fastest growing company owners in the United States, coming from India because of election fraud, wanted to experience a free and democratic election process, who was a Republican, who testified under oath in front of the Michigan government that, she saw fraud going on, and the trucks pulling in the middle of the night, and the ballots. And if you roll the dice, I've met with forensic scientists in Fulton County and DeKalb, about those races in Wisconsin and the late night dumps. And if you take that algorithm that was used across the board and you roll a pair of dice a million times, you're only going to get 52% for Joe Biden. You're not going to get 93% of a late night dump. You're not going to get 87%. It's the statistical impossibility that you're going to get those kinds of numbers as an average in the late night dump. So I think 100%. And Trump only lost by 40,000 votes total in those 5 states. And then just take 2,000 Mules alone, which that movie alone points to 400,000 votes that might have been dumped, with the average ballot harvester dumping 35 to 40 ballots per person, and they think that's only 10% of what happened. So fraud doesn't matter unless it's a Democratic race. Bridgeport, Connecticut, 8,000 votes in the primary were thrown out, but it was a Democratic primary. So it only counts when it's versus a Democrat. I firmly believe that that election was stolen.
Yeah, I do too. And again, if you look at this book and how thick it is, obviously David just went over a number of things very, very quickly, um, which is very concerning as far as all the things that you said. There's a lot more. One of the things that is most intriguing to me, that on top of everything you said and everything that's in this book, is if you look at the just the national vote, right? Not the electoral college, the national vote of all presidential elections, just going back many, many years. The winner from year to year, like Barack Obama, he had slightly more of the popular vote than he did the first year he won, right? It's always roughly the same. The difference, in the loser is the same. It's usually, it obviously goes up every 4 years, and if you look over eight years and 16 and stuff, the population goes up, so you're naturally going to get a growth. But it's usually from election to election, it's roughly the same. They get roughly the same amount, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. Donald Trump got 12 million more than he got in 2016. 12 million. That is, and to then lose is virtually, it's an impossibility to get 12 million more than he did in 2016 and lose.
Right.
It's not possible.
And just take into account, even if you don't believe in the fraud, the election interference alone cost Trump the election officially. If the Hunter Biden laptop would have come out, it would have been game over for Biden, no matter what. And and if you just take that aspect of it, and that's fraud. When you have the MSM, academia, entertainment, the government, all against Donald Trump because he shook the establishment up. And one of his first moves when he took the office of president, was to ban congressmen from lobbying for 5 years after they left Congress. Maybe that was the nerve that sparked this whole thing, I'm very worried. I did follow a lot of other races over the years, and I participated in a lot. There's areas where, it's not so much fraud. It's just that the Democrats have the ground game, and they've got the unions. Lawyers gave $98 million in 2022 midterms, like in Pennsylvania. I don't think there was a lot of fraud in the midterms in 2022. And the polls were spot on. Fetterman won, Shapiro won by 12, 13 points. But you got to remember, the lawyers gave $98 million to the Democrats, and they only gave like 30 million to the Republicans. Doctors and nurses gave like 58 million. They only gave like 30 million to the Republicans. Municipal unions gave 19 million to the Democrats and only $1 million to the Republicans, $1.5 million. And the ground game, you've got the government workers, you've got the college students, you've got retired people, you've got a whole thing. The Democrats have that game down pat. So you combine that with fraud in areas, and then you combine that with the mainstream media pushing a narrative, and our kids getting brainwashed in school, and then Hollywood with this constant message of leftism and wokeism. How do you break that? And Trump did it, and he did it regardless of that. And
he did it with it, with everything you said, as I mentioned, and gained 12 million more votes.
Right.
Like, it's an impossibility that he could have lost. So do you think that you can't predict the future, but what do you think about 2024? Obviously, they're doing everything in their power to either, indict him, which they have over stupid things that are inconsequential and not even illegal, whatever. But they're also trying to take him off ballots in certain states, and have, although that may be reversed in some states. What do you think in 2024?
I think in some ways it's backfiring on the left because the Alvin Bragg case in the New York City, even if he did something wrong, would have been misdemeanors and process stuff, for an accountant, but they turned them into felonies. I think that is transparent, biased. The real estate lawsuit, the civil suit against the Trump family is ridiculous. I'm a builder from New York. Everyone is subject to the bank's analysis. Deutsche Bank called Trump a whale. They went after his business. He paid his loans back with 2.5, 3 times the value he borrowed on time. They loved him. And their assessment and appraisers was based on his financial statements, which have caveat emptor and disclosures in there that disqualify him from being the sole assessor and appraiser of his property value. You could say your property's worth whatever you want. And then you take the Trump brand. So Mar-a-Lago could be worth $1 billion, not 27 million or 18 million. Jeff Bezos bought a house on a few acres that's 40 million and it's 10,000 feet. Mar-a-Lago 60,000 feet on 30 acres. So the whole thing is a bias, and we can see through that. And then you have Fannie Willis, who was probably sleeping with the special prosecutor that she appointed to the case, and he got $1 million. She's corrupt. There's rumors that she was sleeping with a gang member that she was prosecuting as a DA for murder. I think there's some good news, but I don't think we've seen anything yet. I am very worried about this year. And people saying, assassination of Trump and all this stuff, but I don't even think you have to go that far. I think we have not seen anything yet. And this country is going to be divided, and it's going to be divided in half. And the question is, do we get through it? And will the power go out on October 1st until the election? We don't know what's coming. I think there will be some type of event. I think, it doesn't have to be an outbreak or anything, but, they're not going to let Trump take office again. And I'm very worried about it. And I think he's a populist. I think he's a man of the people. I've been around him about 100 times. I've been to many things at Mar-a-Lago. He loves people. He loves people. He doesn't care about the politics as much, and he stops and talks to the concrete worker when he was in the city. I'm in New York City all the time, and people come up to me. Donald Trump came up to me. I was a doorman. I was the limo driver. I was the concrete guy. He came and he stopped, asked me how many PSI the concrete was, and he took an interest. 60% of his real estate group in New York City of the Trump organization were women. So, he has this dynamic that none of the other candidates have. DeSantis doesn't have it. He's not as friendly. And Nikki Haley's awkward with people. Chris Christie is just on another planet somewhere sometimes. I don't think there's anybody like him. But, the question is it going to be allowed to happen? And even if they can't convict him, now 3 of the 4 trials may not occur in 2024, which could be good news for Trump. This is going to be a battle for the souls of Americans. And I think people will come around and see that Trump does truly care about America and America first. And I don't know if we're going to have a choice but to accept that fact, not to run on here, but in summary, I think things are going to be bad. I think the economy is going to catch up because it's propped up. Quantitative easing and the printing of money and the inflation, I think it's going to catch up with us this year. And that combined with an untenable situation in our inner cities. And I think the black vote, I'm working with pastors in Chicago and New York and all over the country. The black vote, there's going to be a sea change. You might get another 5+ points there. How could he not win?
Right. Yeah, it is scary. I mean, everything you said, I think it tells you how dangerous he is to this establishment by the fact that, he was impeached twice for no reason. Obviously, I mean, those that are knowledgeable and educated on the issue know that there was no basis for impeachment. And speaking of impeachment, specifically the second impeachment, which was stupid, which had to do with January 6th. There's lots coming out. It's a topic that I'm very interested in because there have been so many lies, and I'm tired of people calling it an insurrection. Give me a break, right? Regardless of even if you think that it was worse than I think it was. Yes, there was some violence and people that were, it needed to be held accountable for their behavior. Absolutely. No one wants bad behavior, but it certainly was not an insurrection in any sort.
Yeah.
What are you seeing out there?
I was in the studio down the street that day. I knew a lot of people on the ground there. Rav had 3 crews on the ground. We know what happened. We know what happened there. And there was definitely infiltrators. There was definitely some type of Antifa or BLM. Look at John Sullivan. He's on camera admitting, look, I told you so. He knew in advance that J6 was going to happen. And look at this disgusting slap on the wrist for Ray Epps, who was inciting people the night before, calling people in. People move the horses for these people. I interview J6ers all the time who were led into the Capitol, did nothing wrong, and their lives are ruined. And Ray Epps gets to stay home, isn't imprisoned while he's waiting for trial. And like Bernie Kerik always tells me, first they come after you, then they come after your family, then they come after your attorney-client privilege, and then they bankrupt you. I don't think there's any doubt. And this is the only insurrection in history that was unarmed and had tour guides.
Right. Right.
So you could take the bad actors out of the equation. It's a handful of people. But I think the whole thing was set up. I think it's proven at this point. And we know, I mean, look at Kinzinger fake crying in front of Americans.
Yeah.
Look at all the people they're arresting, 80-year-old ladies, I have a friend who owns a big chain of funeral homes here on Long Island, Peter Maloney, and they arrested him. He didn't do anything wrong. He's sitting outside the Capitol. He didn't commit any violence or anything. And the guy's has to spend probably $1 million in his own defense. Most people don't have it. And the attorneys that are representing these J6ers, even if they're Republicans or pro J6, they're not going to put it all on the line and screw up their reputation with the court. So they're not doing their jobs in a lot of cases, from what I hear from people who are J6 on trial. And the last thing I would say about that is the public defenders are using statements from other people and slapping them in front of other people and so saying, use this. They're not qualified, or they're not really willing to put it all on the line either. I think it's stacked. It's right across from FBI headquarters to the judiciary in Washington. It's a big kind of close, cozy thing. And I have people close to me that are Joint Terrorism Task Force, and they're heroes, and they broke up a lot of terrorist attacks before and after 9/11. We're on the ground in 9/11 and the devastating loss. And I lost my best friend in 9/11. So there were a lot of great people. And the FBI was not the same as it is today. It's been weaponized against the American people. It's turned into somewhat of a KGB type operation. And is the CIA, the GRU, the military asset wing of the Communist Party that went after people too? So what's going on in America? And Catholics are being spied on in church, and people are being arrested for protesting outside of pro-life, abortion clinics. People having their doors kicked in, no-knock warrants. The ATF doesn't need a warrant now to come to your house. So, we're in a tough spot. And I don't know if it gets better or if it gets worse. I really can't say.
Well, everything you just described sounds like someone could be describing Russia or North Korea.
Yeah.
Or some of these places that we say, oh, they're so horrible, and certainly they are in their behavior. But everything you just talked about is awful. That's why do I fear Putin? Everything that he's charged with is happening here, and is definitely going against any common sense, certainly that Thomas Paine wrote about.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, you have to take Putin, right? Not a great guy.
Sure.
Right. Their internal police. And when you're in business in Russia, they partner with you and they become your partner, and it's it's very corrupt. And there's no doubt. And Putin's not Snow White, but the reality is that he respected Trump. And there's no leadership role in the world. And Saudi Arabia and Iran have moved away to the BRICS. 25% of the world's GDP is fighting for the devaluation of the US dollar. We never would have went back into Ukraine, Putin, if Trump was president. And listen, Trump supported Ukraine. He gave them Javelin missiles, had the toughest sanctions on Russia ever, and promised a missile shield back in Poland. But what's gone on, because of Democrat and Republican corruption in the Ukraine, we've been exposed. And I think that Biden has been used as an asset for Zelensky and China. So, it's not that Trump was allied with Putin. It's that, we recognize Putin and a tough stance. Listen, when the Democrats are president, Jimmy Carter, they went into Afghanistan. They went into they took Crimea under Obama, the Russians. They went into Ukraine under Obama the first time. They went into Ukraine the second time under Biden. These things don't happen when we have strong Republican presidents, and it's just the way it is. And we're really in a bad spot right now. So do you commit and then commit to World War III in Ukraine? I mean, what are we going to do? And, Russia has 500,000 casualties. Like 350 or 500,000 casualties in Ukraine. Now they're really doing a lot of damage to Ukraine troops, and Ukraine can't sustain the way it is. But we're going to be sinking a lot more weaponry. They got these new missile launchers from the Czech Republic. They've got F-16s coming. This is really going to escalate. I'm very worried about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well said, and great place. Great place to end our conversation, even though I could go on talking with you for a
Yeah.
lot longer. David Zere from Real America's Voice, great stuff. Keep up the great work. If you're not listening to David or watching David, you have to be, because I mean, if you were intrigued in what he talked about today, you're going to want to hear more and more from him. So please listen, definitely listen to Real America's Voice, the network. They're doing great work. So David Zere, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right. And thank you, Jerry. And you can go to the americafirstwarehouse.com and go to the americafirstwarehouse.com/events, see all the great events they have down here. Check out Real America's Voice News. And, I'll have you on my show. So it'll be really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. And thank all of you for listening to this episode of Fide's podcast. Please check out all my podcasts and all the different podcast apps on YouTube, Rumble, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on rightamericamedia.com and on WHK Radio /podcasts.com as well. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.